All right. Hey, everyone. It is Wednesday, and I'm going to do a little review here on a very short. Well, this is a video clip, actually. It's only about 7 minutes long, which means probably should be done in about 4 hours. That's how I do my commentary. Now, this is not very long. This is like I said, this is a clip. This is from a channel called Pangburn. I'm not familiar with them, and yeah, I'm sorry I'm using your content, Pangburn, but I'm giving you full credit. The video to the link, or the link to the video is in the video description, so please go subscribe to Panberg. I'm using his content, fair use, and all that to commentary on. So at least you can do is go over there and give him a sub or something. He's got like 100,000 something, so I don't think he's gonna be too upset. I'm critiquing one of his videos if you ever notice to watch it. Actually, it's not even him on the video. It's his Matt Dillahunty and Dinesh DeSouza talking. And this is, I guess, from a longer, full discussion that they had, which I may or may not listen to other parts. It's just one part here, particular that I listened to. And yeah, it's just, it's funny because I started watching this video clip and I was like, hey, Matt's making sense here for a change. Hey, maybe Matt has seen the light. Maybe Matt has educated himself a little bit more on philosophy and science and all this other stuff. And then it all goes to hell. And he just becomes the typical Matt Dillahunty that I've, grown to expect when he's talking about certain topics. And so you guys know that I like calling Matt out when he says stupid things and he gets things wrong. It's just something that I enjoy doing. So here I go. So make sure you guys can hear me properly. All the audio works. Like I said, not expecting a huge turnout for these things. I don't get a lot of views on these particular videos, although I should, because if I could point out where Matt starts making some errors, then you guys certainly can. So let's go from there. I'm just going to play probably chunks of 1 minute because, again, I think initially Matt makes some actually correct statements. So not much to say on those, but let's just dive into it. So this is a discussion that Matt Dillahunty and Dinesh DeSouza, who's a theologian, apologist, talking about why believe in God.
Or whatever. How do we go about determining whether or not that proposition is reasonable to accept? Okay, on the God front, change or whatever. How do we go about determining whether or not that proposition is reasonable to accept? Okay, and on the God front, maybe you have something better than anybody else has come up. What is the reasonable warrant for accepting that there's a God at all?
Okay, let me try to answer that.
And before he does, that's a fair question. If we have a proposition and the proposition is God exists, how do you go about evaluating that? Very fair question. But I think that Matt's never going to accept any of the answers given him by theists, right? Theists have evaluated the proposition that there's a God, and they've come to the conclusion that there is. And they could spend hours and hours and hours trying to explain to people why they did. When I was a theist, I could explain why I became a theist, but it wouldn't matter to somebody who didn't have those same experiences, or wouldn't matter to somebody who has a different approach to the proposition, right? And so they've evaluated the proposition differently. I think it's very difficult for theists who want to evangelize and want to convince people based upon, some kind of evidential route, because I do agree with Matt, the evidence is lacking. But most of the time people are convinced that I've seen because it's socially acceptable in their little communities by peer pressure to believe in some kind of deity. I went to a Christian youth club for quite some time in high school before I even became a theist, and I was never really feeling comfortable there. But there's a lot of pressure there. We're going to save you. Salvation. Read the Bible, and let's play some games, listen to some rock and roll type music, and I think a lot of people convert just to be one with their peers kind of thing. I think there's a lot of peer pressure, so it's hard to say I believe in God and what's your rationale when it might be just because they were raised to do so, which, by the way, is fair rationale. I'm not saying it's not, but you're not going to convince somebody like Matt Dillahunty that there's a God because you believed in it because your friends have told you, your parents have told you, your pastors have told you. That's not going to be very convincing to a skeptic, and I get that. I'm actually on board with that. John says, hey, Steve, I hated watching this the first time around. I'm very interested to see what you make of it. Oh, and hopefully that you, like I said, it's just this one segment. I know there's more, but I'm just starting with this one segment. So,
I start with the fact that here we are flung into the world with no clear understanding of where the universe came from, not the earth, but the universe.
And I like how he makes that distinction, right? I'm not a big, by the way, I'm not a Dinesh DeSouza fan, but I do like the way he makes that distinction. We are in the dark when it comes to how the universe was created. Yes, there's theories out there and things of that nature, but it's not so much, how the earth came about. It is how the reality that the earth is in came about. It's when he's just talking about the universe. I don't think he's mentioning just our physical universe. He's talking about the universe that's all things. And that it does require some kind of accounting if you want to explain it. And it may not be explainable. It might just be a brute flat fact. But if we do want to explain it, yeah, I happen to agree. Science is not the way to go about doing that. But we are in the dark about why something exists rather than nothing. Why there is a universe to even apprehend. Why is there something there to even observe, to even question why there's something there to observe? That's a metaphysical question in philosophy. So he says, I'm already in a tangent about something they're not even talking about. That's exactly what they just talked about. How can I be in a tangent about something that they just literally talked about? What's the tangent?
B, why we're here and what the purpose of our life is. And C, what, if anything, happens to us after we die? I would argue that, so we are in a very peculiar position where human beings were flung into the world, and the three of the most important questions we could possibly ask, we have no answer to.
And I think he's right on that. And I don't think theists have the answers either. I think they, again, believe they do, but I don't put it as a knowledge claim. But they are metaphysical questions that people have asked for thousands of years. And so I don't think somebody's going to come along in time soon and go, oh, look, I have the answer to this. But I think a lot of people want to have closure. They want to feel like they have answers. And I think religion gives them that sense that they feel closure to some of those very deep and profound metaphysical questions that, to me, are not answered.
Now I'm going to agree with you.
Do you agree or you not?
I'm going to agree with you on two of the three. The middle one on purpose, I think, assumes there's a purpose that has. There's been no demonstration there's a purpose to it.
What, if any, purpose we have for our life? Okay, so now we are in agreement that on the three cardinal questions, we are in a certain kind of blindness.
Yeah, and that's look, and that was a good way to approach that. You have to assume that there's something. If there's a value, where did that value came from, right? I do believe life has an inherent meaning. I think that we do have value that's both internal and external. I don't think you have to specifically adopt an internalist or external framework in order to have axiological value. I do think we give our lives meaning in the existential sense. I think existentialism is one way to go about that, to give us a sense of purpose. However, I personally think that life itself has some kind of internal value to it. But again, that's just how I look at things. There's no right or wrong answer to that. I think it's just whatever you wish to choose.
We're in a certain kind of blind ignorance because we don't know, correct?
So I don't. So if we start, you're saying we're flung into this universe without an understanding of the origin of the universe, the purpose of life, or what happens afterwards.
Right, where the universe came from,
yes.
Who, if anyone, or what made it, if anyone. B, what the purpose of our life is, if any. And C, what, if anything, happens to us after we die.
We are in violent agreement right now.
Okay,
Perfect.
I think, and I'm in agreement too. Anybody not in agreement? Those are three very profound metaphysical questions that we are all, I think, in the dark. And I think religion comes along that says, hey, we have the answers. Believe this, regardless if it's true or not, because if you have 40,000 different denominations out there, I'm sorry, they all cannot be correct. And so people will have the wrong answer. If one of the answers is correct, the other ones are wrong, as far as the ones that don't jive with each other, so to speak, right? I mean, obviously there's some nuance when it comes to religions that most of them are going to have the ballpark, but some of them are radically different from each other.
Perfect. Now, the second question arises, what does science have to say about these three questions? Can science, either now, and if it can't now, settle these matters
Probably
in the
not.
future? Let's look at them one by one. Let's take them in reverse order.
Sure.
Can science decide the matter of whether or not there is life after death, yes or no?
It depends.
Depends on what?
So science only deals with the natural world.
That's correct.
And so if in fact there's a supernatural existence after this, then it may forever be beyond the purview of science.
Yeah, and I happen to agree with that. As science is the methodological approach of science that we have today, it precludes the God claim. It is not set up to address the God claim. In other words, it cannot answer the question if God exists or not. It has no testable way to go about doing that. And one of the things I've mentioned before, if God exists, there's no way to control for any variables of God wanting to screw with your experiment. If God wants to not be found, an experiment's not going to find him, right? I mean, if you assume he's an omnipotent, all-powerful, omnipotent, omniscient being that can do all these different things, you have no control over your experiment if God's messing with it or not, just to hide himself. So, yeah, science is set up to where you cannot just posit supernatural causations for that very reason. One, you'd be positing an infinity of them. Fairies did it, leprechauns did it, ghosts did it. I mean, you can sit there and posit just about anything in the supernatural set. So, as science stands now, I do believe that it is outside the purview of science to address certain questions when it comes to philosophy, and I'm completely fine with that. That's the way it should be. That's the way it was by design.
Correct. Or if there is another universe that operates according to different laws, and we happen to move somehow into that universe, science would have nothing to say about it. Correct?
Not necessarily, because if it's a natural, like we have like hypotheses about a multiverse or whatever. Correct. I can't say what science will be able to test for in the future, or whether or not that we are permanently confined to the cosmos that we experience. I can't say. I can't even rule out. I can't say that science could never say anything about the supernatural. All I can say is that as it stands right now, I'm unaware of any supernatural claim that has any evidence for it that science could evaluate to determine that it was true.
All right, and I happen to agree with Matt on this, believe it or not. I don't think there's a shred of scientific evidence for any supernatural claim. Now, that's different from saying there's not evidence. I think there's evidence for supernatural. I just don't think science is the domain from which that evidence comes from. Because if science is excluded from addressing the supernatural claim, can be no positive evidence in science of supernatural events. The most it could ever say is we don't have an answer to this. It'll remain unexplained. That's the best really science can obtain. Because what would a supernatural causation in science look like, even if we could determine one? How would we go about determining that? Let's say we did an experiment and we said, hey, we're going to play with a Ouija board or something and see if something moves. Okay. Still, how do you get the causality between something moving and the Ouija board? You could say, hey, look, theoretically that they summon demons or ghosts, and therefore, it's most likely hypothesis abductively. But, you're on very tentative ground there. You still have no scientific way to correlate the movement to some kind of non-corporeal being. You're just basically throwing guesses out there because we've never seen a non-corporeal being do such a thing. We don't know the properties of any non-corporeal being like that. Right? So that's why it's very difficult, if not impossible, for science to address these types of claims. Now, it can disprove these claims. If science goes in and it shows a natural explanation for something that somebody had claimed to be supernatural, that's perfectly fine. You could do that. So I'm in agreement with Matt here. This is what I'm saying. I was like, oh, hey, Matt's right on this stuff so far. You'll see when he goes off the rails. You guys will point it out to me, I think.
Right. Let's put it a little differently because I don't want to debate the detail here. I just want to look at the macro picture. And what I'm basically saying is Shakespeare said, I think correctly, death is the undiscovered country. No one has been to the other side of the curtain and essentially reported, given us empirical evidence one way or the other, correct?
Yeah. Now, obviously, Christians disagree with that, clearly. But yes, I think as skeptics would agree that specifically scientifically, nobody has died and came back and been able to say what happens after death. Now, there's people that came close to death, but brain death, as far as like actual clinical death where you are no more, you cease to be, you are the dead parrot, so to speak, if you ever watch Monty Python. At that point, there's ever been any evidence that anybody or anything has ever come back from that kind of state. Now, there are some interesting things with like tardigrades that can be desiccated to the point where you think they're dead, but they're not. But that's still impressive. But as far as like a human being, nobody's got to that ability where they died and then like a year later came back, so.
We don't know what happens after that.
So here's the thing. I promise I'm not being difficult. This is just for clarity. As a skeptic, my position is not, like when
Now listen very carefully, because this is where Matt starts to go off the rails. This is where I start saying Matt Dillahunty is intellectually dishonest, because I see this move quite frequently. It's a dishonest move, and Matt Dillahunty should be called out every single time he does it by theists, and I think that most of them do. But so we rewind this a bit. But see where he goes off the rails here.
The psychics who claim that they're speaking with the dead.
Hang on, let me go.
Skeptic. My position is. Here's the thing, and I promise I'm not being difficult. This
yeah,
is
you are.
Just for clarity.
Well, listen.
As a skeptic, my position is not, like when the psychics who claim that they're speaking with the dead.
Right.
My position is not they're wrong and that's bullshit. My position is They cannot demonstrate that what they're actually doing is what they claim.
Okay. Matt, you are dishonest. Your position is their position is bullshit. My position is their position is bullshit. People that claim they can do things like tarot cards, astrology, talk to the dead, all the stuff that James Randi, the amazing James Randi, showed was bullshit, I believe is bullshit. I don't believe in, it's more than just I don't believe. I believe that psychics are bullshit. I believe that people that claim they can predict your future are bullshit. I claim that people who do tarot cards is bullshit. It's not merely they haven't demonstrated it. I claim they are wrong. Right? And so being a skeptic is not sitting back going, oh, I just don't believe you. That's not skepticism. In fact, when it talks about skepticism is actually the denial of knowledge. It's a position that knowledge cannot be acquired. It doesn't exist. But in the more colloquial sense, I'm okay. Okay, when we mean skeptic, he means somebody who doubts without believing something without sufficient reason, or somebody who's just not going to believe these supernatural claims when they hear them very easily. I'm okay with that. I get what he means by skeptic. Okay, but even in that aspect of the word skeptic, that doesn't mean you're sitting back going, I just don't believe you. Does anybody here think Matt literally just doesn't believe that psychics are real, or do you think he actually holds the position that psychics are bullshit? Because I can tell you right now, I'm convinced beyond all measure that he believes psychics are bullshit. What do you guys believe? Do you guys believe psychics are bullshit, or do you believe that you just merely don't have enough evidence from them, therefore you don't believe? Because they are completely two different positions. I don't have to read his mind. I'm going by evidence. I've known the man for a very long time. I've listened to him for 10 years. He has said there's things like there is no God. He has said the supernatural is bullshit. He has said that gods are imaginary. He has said that he has a positive belief that there is no God. These are his positions. I don't have to read his mind. So you want to walk that back and actually address what I'm actually saying, because I have listened to Matt Dillahunty for 10 years. These are his positions. I guarantee it. Go ask him. Go watch his original videos on the atheist experience. He had all these positive beliefs. But you can't just sit there and say, oh, I'm not claiming the psychic's wrong. Well, yeah, he has before. He has said that he believes all this stuff's BS. So, and then it gets worse.
And so I can't say.
Oh, but like I said, let me ask the audience, what do you guys believe? Do you guys believe that psychics and all that is BS, or you believe that you just don't have sufficient reason to believe it, therefore you're neutral on it?
Hey, nobody's been to the other side and communicated back. I can just say there's no reliable evidence for it, and I don't know what shape that evidence would take in order to demonstrate.
Okay, I want to come back to that, because that you've now made to me a very striking claim, namely that we should, I think you're saying, disbelieve all claims for which there is not sufficient evidence.
Now, this is not what he said, and Dinesh is wrong on this. That's not what Matt said. But I want you to make it pay very close attention here, because the word he used is disbelieve. Right? Disbelieve. Now, a couple years back, somebody had called into the atheist experience, and they had talked to Matt, and they used the word disbelieve, and they used it to mean what it is understood in logic, which is to believe the proposition is false. Matt chastised that guy. What was his name? It escapes me, but I knew the guy. But I wrote a blog on it, and I explained that in philosophy and in logic, the term disbelieve means to believe false. That's how it's understood. It doesn't mean the colloquial version of, oh, I stared in disbelief, right? You don't stare in disbelief of a proposition. Words have different usages, right? So if you say you disbelieve the proposition, that doesn't mean you stared, unbelievingly at the proposition. No, if you disbelieve a proposition, it means you believe the proposition is false. This is how it's understood. And so Dinesh misrepresents Matt's position here, or at least what he said, because it's the opposite of what Matt said. Matt said, oh, I'm not saying I don't I'm not saying I disbelieve them or I think they're BS. I am saying that they haven't provided evidence scientifically of their position. Okay, sure. I mean, I agree with them on that. But Dinesh took that and ran with it and made it into the negative, made it into the disbelief. But Matt called me out on that. Matt thinks that I was wrong on that. Matt was saying that disbelief merely means to not believe. And I was like, that's not what it means, Matt. That's not how it's used in the academic literature. Right? So Dinesh got that wrong.
So
not just that we should take an agnostic position, but we should disbelieve them. That's two different things.
Now, this is where I come in. Hello. A holy pope of agnosticism here. Dinesh is saying to Matt, and he's wrong on this because it's not what Matt said. This is the opposite of what Matt said. But he's saying we should take. He's saying, Matt, you're arguing that we should disbelieve something as false rather than take an agnostic position, with a position of neither believing nor not believing, neither believing that it's true and not believing it's false, right? So he's saying don't take a neutral position on, but take a disbelief position. But that's not what Matt said at all, right? Oh, Autistic Shill gifted 5 memberships. Thank you, Autistic Shill. Thank you, Mod. Thank you. We've been getting a lot of memberships lately. They're all mostly UKers, so they're probably not around this stream, but we have gotten quite a few memberships gifted, so appreciate that. But here's Matt's response. Listen to this. This is why he's so intellectually dishonest.
So if you mean disbelieve as in believe they are not true, that's the exact opposite of what I just said.
Now, he's right on it. It is the complete opposite of what he just said. But listen to what he said. If you mean disbelieve as believes false, which is exactly what I've told Matt it meant. I have a whole blog on that. Because Matt chastised a caller for saying disbelieve doesn't mean believes false. To him, it means does not believe. But notice how he changes these words now. I think he's been told that he was wrong on that. Thank you, Autistic Shill. So and it gets worse.
Okay.
What I said was we should believe things when there's evidence for it, and that is both the proposition that the supernatural is real and the proposition that the supernatural is not real. You can so agnosticism isn't some middle ground between believing X and believing not X. There is no middle ground. You are either convinced of X or you are not convinced of X.
Okay. But here's where he's intellectually dishonest. We all know agnosticism is not the middle ground between believes X and does not believe X. Nobody argues otherwise. I have never seen a single solitary academic argue ever in any paper that agnosticism is some position between I believe and I do not believe. That's a straw man. I've explained to Matt, others have explained to Matt, agnosticism is the middle position between believes P and does not believe P, which is hilarious because he just said you can believe the proposition is true or you can believe it's false. He just said you can believe it or disbelieve it. Agnosticism is in the middle of those two. You have believe, you have neither believe true, neither believe false, and then you believe false. So Matt Dillahunty is being intellectually dishonest here because, again, he starts bringing up agnosticism and starts arguing it's not some position between believe and not believe, which is true, but that's a fallacy of a relevant thesis. We all know that's the case, but nobody's argued otherwise. He's not being honest there because he should be saying to the audience, he is taking he's supposedly taking the agnostic position. If he believes that psychics are false, then he disbelieves the psychics. But he's not arguing that. He's just saying, I don't believe the psychics are true based upon the fact they have not given any scientific evidence. That's agnosticism. That's unbelief. But if you don't have a positive epistemic status, as I've proven in my logic, you are agnostic by logical commitment, I guess. I mean, by at least semantic commitment. If you don't have a position either way, we call that agnostic. If Matt Dillahunty is arguing, well, I'm not saying psychics are fake, I'm not saying they're real, that's agnostic on that proposition, which I've tried to explain to him for years, and he's still, will argue against that, but that's exactly what it means. So that's why he's just so intellectually dishonest, because he keeps on trying to argue this stupid argument that nobody argues, that agnosticism is the middle ground between belief and non-belief, which nobody's ever argued. But I hear him say it all the time. He says it on the Atheist Experience all the freaking time. He says, well, there is no middle ground between belief and not belief. No kidding. Nobody's argued otherwise. Why do you keep arguing something that nobody's ever said?
And
at least any scholar, right? Said.
I'm not convinced that the supernatural is real. That doesn't mean that I'm convinced that the supernatural isn't real. It's kind of like if you go into...
And that's true. Again, a relevant thesis. Matt keeps pointing out this point that if you do not believe P, it does not mean that you believe it's false or believe it's true, right? If you don't have a position either way. And he's right. That would be the converse fallacy. Believing something to be true implies you do not believe it's false. And believing something is false implies you don't believe it's true. That is absolutely correct. But those are called subalternations. And the subalternation does not work in the converse. In other words, if P implies Q, it doesn't necessarily mean that Q implies P. It's a material condition, but it's not a bilateral condition. It's not work. It doesn't work in both directions. It's not bilateral. But it will work in just one direction. If something implies that, then it may or may not mean that it would be in the converse, but you can't say for sure, right? You just can't argue that. But agnosticism, again, isn't the position between believe and disbelieve. Isn't the position between believe and not believe. It's the position between believe and disbelieve. And those are not the same thing. So Matt is right. I mean, just because he doesn't believe in something doesn't mean he believes it's false. But the reality is he does believe it's false. This is why I think he's intellectually dishonest. Matt's position is there is no God. Matt's position is psychics and those fake healers are fakes. That's his position. If you don't think otherwise, you're kidding yourself. It's my position. I make the claim faith healers are fake.
A courtroom.
Okay.
I may have to say not guilty, even if I'm not convinced of innocence, because the burden of proof is on the claim of guilt.
Okay, but see how he's using the legal things, right? Which was Flu's paper in 1972, and he's trying to argue that, but he's completely ignoring there is the other half of that proposition. The other half of that proposition is there is no God. He's not even evaluating that. Why does he always want the theists to put out the position that there is a God and then sit back and go, well, I'm evaluating that, but not the other coextensive proposition that has to come along with it. If you have one, you have to have the other. You know, I would love for Matt to get in a debate of, somebody to an actual atheist that says there's no God. What is he going to argue with him? Well, I just don't believe you. No, he does believe the atheist when the atheist says there is no God. That's his position. This is what I'm saying. When you're intellectually dishonest, you have to play all these little mind games. And what Matt does is he plays these mind games by saying, I'm not going to tell you my true position in a debate. I'm going to hide behind a middle ground, the agnostic position, my position, and call that skepticism and agnosticism and think that's a discussion. That's intellectually dishonest, Matt. Say your position. Own it. And by the way, yes, agnosticism or middle ground requires a burden of proof. Matt will swear to he's blue in the face that I'm wrong on that. Well, he's wrong. Go ask an expert. Go take a course in philosophy. Go study epistemology. If you do not believe and you don't have reason for that non-belief, then it is unjustified. And if it's unjustified, it means it's not rational. If you are aware of the proposition, if you try to evaluate it and you just say, look, I'm hopelessly deadlocked on it. I cannot come to a conclusion whether there's a God or not a God. That is agnostic. That requires a burden of proof, which is, somewhat easy to come to. But you still have to have a reason for that. And again, I use the canonical law of identity. For all of X, X equals X. If you do not accept that, I will not consider you to be a rational person. As simple as that. Well, I don't have to give a reason why I don't believe X equals X. Well, I mean, if you want to have a persuasive conversation or dialectic or have a discussion with me, yeah, you do. Because if you don't, I'm just going to assume you're not rational. You have no onus as far as evidential. You don't have to prove to me that you don't believe it. I couldn't care less. I accept that you don't. I mean, I'll accept your arguendo that you don't believe it, which I think is silly because I think everybody believes X equals X. But let's just for the sake of the argument, say you don't believe X equals X. Then I'm going to say, well, what's your reasoning for that? And if you don't have a reason, your burden of proof, I'm going to just assume you are completely inept and not have a conversation with you. Does that make sense? I mean, anybody who says that you don't have a burden of proof for not believing is just an idiot. Hi, Matt. I mean, Matt's an idiot when it comes to that. Why would you think it's completely fine to say, I don't believe X equals X, and I have no burden of proof to justify that non-belief? Of course you do. because it's an ingredient to rationality to accept certain canonical classical laws of logic. And the law of identity is the most fundamental law you can get. I mean, the other ones you can deny in other forms of logic. And in theory, you could come up with a type of logic that could deny identity. I don't know what it look like, but this is to say in theory. But there are other logics where you deny the law of excluded middle and non-contradiction, like the paraconsistent or diatheistic logics, and that's fine. Nothing wrong with those logics. They're called truth gap or truth glut logics that don't use those canonical forms. But the law of identity is pretty significant in that I mean, I don't know what well-formulated logic you can form if you don't start with the premise x equals x. If you start with the premise x does not equal x, you could build logic from that. It would be clearly paraconsistent, right? But I mean, you could do it, but the problem is that I think it would be very difficult to avoid principle of explosion. But I mean, there are logics where you could avoid principle of explosion, obviously, diatheistic logics, but law of identity is pretty important, and that's why I'm saying if you don't think the law of identity is true, then why would I think you're a rational person? Because you didn't meet your burden of proof for why you didn't accept it. All right, continuing on. My little rant on law of identity.
And so the people who say, I have good evidential warrant to believe in the supernatural, have adopted a burden of proof, and they have to meet it. And until they do, I am not convinced.
Well, no, okay. This again, Matt, you're intellectually dishonest. First of all, the burden of proof that they have is to themselves, that they have justified in their minds that they are sufficiently warranted to believe there's a God. They don't owe you anything, Matt. Who are you to a theist? Nobody has any onus to demonstrate jack shit to Matt Dillahunty. Matt can sit there and go, I don't believe you, I don't believe you, I don't believe you. I don't give a crap. You still have your own beliefs, and you still have your own positions, and you still have your reasoning why you don't believe somebody, but who cares whether you don't believe them or not? I mean, Matt Dillahunty has made a career of saying, I don't believe you. Even though his actual positions are, I believe that you're wrong. That's why I think he's intellectually dishonest. Because he's absolutely has stated, there's no God. That's his actual belief. And yet he'll hide behind this agnosticism and not even call it agnosticism. He'll call it skepticism. He'll call it atheism. But it's not in philosophy. He's holds the atheist position, there's no God, but then he defaults to this agnostic position, which is so intellectually dishonest. I can't even tell you how intellectually dishonest that is. And theists have called him out for it. Atheists have called him out for it. And I think that they need to call him out for it more. Own your positions, Matt. I will tell you my positions. I will tell you that I believe that faith healers are full of crap. I think they're dangerous. I think that anybody who says I can heal you for money is dishonest and probably needs to be investigated for fraud. That's my position. I'm willing to own that position. I'm willing to make arguments for that and meet my burden of proof for that. But Matt's sitting here talking to Dinesh going, I'm not saying psychics are wrong. I'm just saying that they haven't convinced me. So what? They haven't convinced you. Big freaking whoop. Why is it you're not convinced that they're fake, Matt? Please tell the audience that. That's the question that Dinesh should be asking. Why is it you're not convinced that faith healers and psychics and God doesn't exist? And his probably will be his answer. Well, it doesn't matter what I believe or disbelieve. We're arguing your points here. We're talking about your proposition. No. That's not how a fair argument works. But I think that every conversation somebody has with Matt Dillahunty should start off when he starts going down this path is, okay, well, why is it you don't believe there isn't a God? Why is it you don't believe that faith healers are fake? I mean, he'll obfuscate, I'm sure, but I would like to hear his answer for that. I mean, what do you guys think? What would be his answer if somebody had said, "Hey, Matt, why is it you're withholding judgment?" Which is, by the way, agnostic. Why is it you're withholding judgment on the proposition that God doesn't exist? What do you guys think? What's his reasoning for that? And yeah, I can add you guys to the dialogue here in a second. If you give me 2 minutes while I play this, and I'll get StreamYards.
Okay, but let's be clear about what that burden of proof is, because I'm not saying I have definitive proof that God exists or these are his attributes. Here's what I'm saying. I'm saying I don't know if there is a God in the sense of no. I'd call myself a believer. Now, right away, we distinguish between a believer and a knower.
Yeah, and I'm fine with that. Look, I think anytime a theist or an atheist starts talking about knowledge, there's really not much reason to have a conversation with them unless they're really well educated in the topic. If you're a theologian and your understanding of epistemology is on point, then that's fine. If you're an atheist and your understanding of epistemology is on point, that's fine. But the average person who starts talking about knowledge, you're wasting everybody's time. Why bother? I'm not interested in what you think you know, because that opens up a whole different can of worms. I just want to know what your beliefs are. I want to know if you believe there's a God. I want to know if you believe there's no God. That's it. And we'll talk about that dosastically. There's no reason to interject knowledge or certainty or surety in any of these conversations. I get it all the time on people leaving me comments. One person wrote me a treatise about my paper talking about knowledge and certainty. I'm like, where in my paper are these terms? I never once used the word knowledge. I don't think I use it at all. I don't use certainty because it's irrelevant. We're just asking about your dosastic beliefs. That's it. Nothing else. And so Souza's saying, I believe there's a God. He's not claiming knowledge as a God. I respect that. And an atheist can do the same thing. They can say, I believe God doesn't exist, but I'm not making a knowledge claim. Perfectly fair to do that. And the burdens are not difficult to meet for those things. If you're a theist, you can meet the burden of proof to justify your belief. If you're an atheist, you can meet the burden to justify that belief. You owe that burden to yourself, not to Matt Dillahunty. You know, Plantinga goes around and tries to argue theism is rational. You can accept his arguments or not. Some of his points make sense, some of them I don't much agree with, but at least he tries. He has a theory of knowledge called reformed epistemology. And while he argues that God is properly basic, I disagree with that. I mean, it could be a basic belief of some kind, but it's not properly basic, because properly basic beliefs are something that everybody has to accept in order just to function in society. They're ingredients of rationality. And so I don't think you have to accept God as an ingredient to rationality to function. I mean, we have living proof out there that people don't accept God and still function in society. So I don't think that Plantinga is right as trying to define it as a properly basic belief. I understand why he does. And I think that he does argue successfully in some other ways that, you know, believing in God is rational, right? I absolutely. Look, you know, many of us who were theists out there, we were rational when we were theists, I think. I mean, we can't say that we believed because of irrational reasons. We had our reasons. Well, at least most of them did. I mean, some of them sure are rational, but I was very, very rational when I was a theist, but I changed my mind, right? That's what rational agents do. They change their minds after they get more evidence or get more reasons. And Stuart says the difference between a believer and a knower. That's a good distinction. I'm going to remember that. Yeah, I like that. There's a difference between a believer and a knower. And this is what I'm saying. Don't get into these conversations talking about knowledge. Talk about what you believe, right? And so the atheist has the burden of proof to explain why they believe there's no God. The theist has a responsibility in a discussion to give reasons why they believe there is a God. And that's how you have a conversation with each other. Simple as that. And I agree, Stuart. I don't think we can ever really know one way or another, at least not in this lifetime. But whether we can know or not, it's fun discussion to talk about, but it doesn't get us anywhere, whether we can actually know or not. Right now, I just leave it open, whether we can know or not. Maybe, look, if thousands and thousands and thousands of years in the future, people are going around in their lives and there's no more gods. Everybody, you know, believes gods are BS. At that point, it becomes part of the theory, what's called theory of knowledge from what is it called? It's not appeal to popularity. It's a theory of knowledge towards consensus. Yeah, consensus theory of knowledge. That's what it's called. I had to think about that. Consensus theory of knowledge, which sounds like appeal to popularity, right? But when we're talking about knowledge, there's reasons why we take knowledge from a utilitarian position, or what, you know, how it affects everybody. And so if everybody in the world believed a certain way, there's reasons why to accept that as knowledge. It wouldn't be knowledge in the justified true belief sense, though. At least it'd be hard pressed to make that argument because you still haven't demonstrated that it's true. But the pragmatic theories of knowledge and the semantic theories of knowledge and the consilience theories of knowledge don't require that level. So there are more theories of knowledge out there than justified true belief. So I think that if we got to the state where everybody believes there are no gods and they're just a thing of the past, then I think it would make sense to say, yeah, I know there's no gods, because you are talking about epistemic knowledge of some kind, right? You're not talking about it in the Descartes sense. You're not talking about epistemic certainty. Knowledge doesn't require epistemic certainty. You're just talking about it in the knowledge sense. You have a understanding of the information that you're justified to believe. It's hard to show it's true. That's the hardest part. Is the requirement of justified true belief is that the proposition must be true. You can't have false knowledge. That's the most difficult thing to show. But if that requirement's taken away, and you just have, consensus as far as knowledge of theories of knowledge when it comes to consensus or pragmatism, then it's a whole different ballgame, right? So under those theories, it's a lot easier to say I know there's no God because everybody believes there's no God. Just like if I argue there's no Santa Claus, I can make some pretty good arguments to knowledge. Again, we're not talking about the epistemic certainty. We're just talking about to know as in justified true belief. This, if you go read anything in the Gettier experiences, Gettier cases, they're all just mundane things. Somebody says they know something. I know it's 3 o'clock. Well, how do you know that? I looked at my clock. Now, if the clock's wrong, then obviously you didn't know something because you weren't justified because it was based upon epistemic luck. I get that. But if the clock is correct, then you can say, I know it's 3 o'clock. Right? And I think any belief first theory has Gettier problems because they all have to do with this epistemic luck to some degree, right? So I'm fine with that. It's just, no theory is perfect. I bite the bullet. So I'm not going to dump justified true belief just because there's Gettier problems. Gettier problems that happen in every belief first theory. But I think when we're talking about knowledge, that's what it encapsulates, right? If you say, well, how do you know it's 3 o'clock? Well, I have a reliable instrument that I thought was reliable. We want to get into reliabilism. That, told me the time. And that's what we really are trying to capture when we say we know something as a knower. But to get into these discussions here, you don't need that. You don't need that depth of conversation. Hey, Rotfist. Hello. I saw you jump in here. Rot, are you here?
Hello. Yes, I am.
Welcome. Excuse me, anything you would like to add so far?
I don't know. What's Matt's shiny ass head talking about this time? Like, I'm trying to keep up with it.
Wow, you're loud. I'm actually turning down the speakers here.
My apologies.
Yeah, you got a lot of gain there. I don't want to turn down too much because I got to turn down the video. So basically, Matt, I think I think he's just so intellectually dishonest when he goes into these discussions because he never wants to argue his position. He just wants to sit there and say, "Well, I'm not convinced."
Who's he working for? Who's paying his bills? There's no way this is just him.
Oh no, he gets paid a lot of money to go to these debates. I mean, he made a name for himself with the atheist experience, right? But
that's a rub, isn't it?
Yeah, he's garden variety. I mean, seriously, how difficult do you think it is to go to the discussion and say, well, the theist hasn't met their burden of proof when it comes to science, and therefore I don't believe them. That's not an argument, dude. Especially when I know, and I will say that I know this is knowledge because I know the guy and I've listened to him. He believes there is no God. So why does he always default to the agnostic position and then lie about the agnostic position and try to say
there has to be someone filling his pockets to say that because like you said, he's held these beliefs for a long time. Yeah. Yeah, this is not news. No, it's someone sending him a check. I guarantee it.
Let me get through the rest of this video real quick.
Right?
Sure.
It's an important distinction.
Yeah, sure.
I believe there's a place called Papua New Guinea because I trust maps.
I'll mute. I don't want to interrupt.
About it, but I know my brother. I wouldn't say I believe I have a brother.
It's my buddy John.
Well, okay, look. The reason why you say the reason why you don't go around saying I believe that I have a brother is because I think you should always give your most amount of confidence, generally speaking, right? And unless you're restricting it to the dosastic domain, like I think we should in God talk. But as far as like having a conversation, when you say you believe something, it doesn't put a lot of confidence behind it. When you say you know, it gives the listener information that you are stating it more than just a belief, and I think that's the way to go, right? I would say, yeah, I know I had a brother. I don't merely just believe it. I know I had a brother, and so.
Are you sure? Maybe they were an action implication of someone that you thought was your brother.
But surety with enough confidence level to make those claims, right? And if I find out that the claims are wrong, then I reevaluate and I just retract my claim to knowledge, right? I say, I thought I knew, but I retract the claim. I was incorrect about my claim to knowledge. It's called the principle of attribution and retraction. I attribute the claim, and then I withdraw that after realizing that the information was wrong.
It's weird. You can almost go into sort of like physics with it, with sort of like collapsing waveforms. So you have a belief in knowledge. And whilst your belief in knowledge is affirmed by the universe around you and the information that you have, then you don't just have a belief in knowledge, you have knowledge.
Yeah.
But as soon as your belief in knowledge is demonstrated to be wrong, you never actually had knowledge, you only ever had a belief in knowledge.
And you had a false belief about what you thought was the case, right?
Precisely. Your belief has been demonstrated to be wrong, and then if you continue to pursue the belief despite the fact that you've been demonstrated to be wrong, you then no longer have a justified belief.
Well, that's the but that's a rationality. This is why Matt is intellectually dishonest. He's been told many times what agnosticism is, and he knows it. He's talked about it, and he says, "Well, this is what is understood in the literature." Then he goes,
"It's not even that complicated."
Yeah, but then he goes in here and he starts doing the same thing. Well. And I'm not saying, I'm an agnostic on this position. Well, you are, Matt. That's what you're arguing. You're not an agnostic on this position because I know that you believe there's no God. But he's arguing.
He's also
the agnostic position, and I think that's dishonest. What am I missing here? How's this?
He also does a Mott and Bailey.
Yeah, so it's Mott and Bailey.
Absolutely. So he does the Mott and Bailey specifically from the perspective of set theory. So if we look at your paper and how it's founded in set theory, where you've got everything in the universe that exists is your primary set, and then once you go up a set from that, and then you've got entities or things that exist that do believe, and things that exist that don't believe, and then you go down another set below that, and you look at the set of things that don't believe, and the things that don't believe can be atheist because they have a positive disbelief, or things that don't believe can be agnostic because they're just not convinced by the proposition. Right. Now,
the whole thing sounds like a terrible mess that's like way more complicated than it has to be.
But what I mean is, Matt in this debate with DeSouza was taking the position of no, you either believe or you disbelieve, and that's it, which is correct. But then when he's having a discussion with the likes of yourself, Steve, or a disagreement with the likes of yourself, then he says, no, it's not. He will argue the agnostic position as the atheist position and conflate the two sets.
Yeah, sort of.
I am so glad that I turned down an interview with Matt, because it sounds like it would have been the most frustrating, chasing my own tail bullshit.
I would lose my mind. And I think, John, you're right, but I think you may have said something wrong. Matt, in this particular video here, said disbelief means to believe false, right? Because he's arguing against DeSouza, and DeSouza has said, so as I understand you either, if you don't believe something to be true, you believe it to be false, you disbelieve it, is what he said. And Matt's like, no, so
he demonstrated his understanding of the of it by explaining what DeSouza had done by either accidentally or intentionally misrepresenting him.
Yeah, which is weird because, again, Matt lost his shit when he had a caller tell him disbelief means to believe false. He's like, no, that's not what it means. It means not to believe. And I wrote a blog on it. It's still there.
Why would he get so upset? He has like a decent platform, and he has his benefactors who pay his bills.
Because
just chill out and just pretend it didn't. Just ignore them.
Because if he concedes the point, then it changes his burden of proof in formal debates, and then he can't tap dance the way that he does. He
100%.
then has to present a burden of proof, and it means that.
I guess that's his bread and butter. He has to stand firm on it. But I mean, like, come on, man, you got to be honest about this shit. Don't fucking lie to me.
He's a rhetorician, right? I mean, he's just a sophist in many regards, and it's funny because when all that went down with the whole disbelief stuff. The American Atheist, in their about for atheism, specifically says atheism is not the disbelief that God exists; it's a lack of belief. That's what it says. Go look. And I brought that to Arn's attention. Arn would say,
according to a lot of right wingers, atheism is a religion.
Wait. Let me
I love that.
Let me finish. So Arn was arguing to me that atheism is merely a disbelief that God exists. And I try to explain to Arn, disbelief is a positive status. Disbelief means to believe is false. And he's like, no, it's not. Merely means not to believe. I'm like, well, you're the regional director for American Atheist, are you not? And he was a regional something or other for the American Atheist. Go to their webpage. Go right now. Somebody go to their webpage and find what it says.
I'm looking at it.
It says atheism. I'm paraphrasing, but it says atheism is not the disbelief that God exists. It is the lack of belief that God exists. Something along those lines, right? Is that what it says? In the about section for atheism? I'm too lazy to look anything up right now.
One of the things that frustrates me the most about this is like, there's like ancient religions that are so much cooler. I want to go to Valhalla. The heaven sounds like it fucking sucks. I don't want to be blowing God's balls sitting on a cloud. I want to fight and feast.
Well, what's funny is I'm going to be doing a video on that as well, because I was just talking to Secular Outpost on that very topic, but it's a whole different ballgame. But real quick, this is what it says. To be clear, atheism is not a disbelief in God or gods or a denial of gods. It is a lack of belief in gods. This is from American Atheist. What is atheism? Okay, so I said to Matt, I said to Aaron, you're saying atheism is the disbelief, meaning it doesn't not believe. This is what Matt had argued to a guy when the guy called up several years ago, and I wrote my blog. Here's American Atheist that you represent saying it's not a disbelief, but they're wrong. Atheism is the disbelief in God. It is the position God does not exist.
Yeah, it's an absolute negligence, like absence of any belief in any of that shit.
Yeah, right.
I don't understand why it's so hard to explain that to them.
Because they don't care. They're ideologues, and they don't care about facts. Here, look, think about this. It says, to be clear, atheism is not a disbelief in gods. Okay, so what do you call somebody who disbelieves in gods? Oh, an atheist. Because they're using disbelief to mean believe false here, right? Clearly.
Oh yes, we all worship the atheist God. That makes sense.
And so I told Aaron, you're not even saying what American atheists know to be the case about disbelief. And Flavor for $2 says, I disbelieve that God doesn't exist. Which means
just like we're a bunch of cells that evolved from over millions of years, and now we're here. There's no God necessary in that whole process.
By the way, what is
it's interesting. I find the notion of the distinction between type 1 and type 2 errors, and that having a fundamental basis in our evolution as to why we think that why we have a predisposition to.
I have some theories myself from psychological communities that I've worked in. It's like a parent syndrome. People, you grow up with your parents. They take care of everything for you. They feed you, they clothe you, they provide you bedding. And once you rip that away, people are like, where did it go? So that's I think that's part of it. It's like filling that gap.
I mean, I can see that. I mean, just as a for instance, like my dad passed away. It was 2 years ago. February just gone.
I'm sorry. That's terrible.
I mean, he was 66 years old. He was a healthy guy. He developed.
That's young.
Yeah. Well, what happened was he had a an autoimmune condition, like polymyalgia or something. I can't remember the exact term for it, but in very, very, very rare cases, a person can develop something called acquired haemophilia. It's where your immune system attacks the factor VIII in your blood and it fucks all your clotting factors.
Yeah, you
can bleed his initial symptom was bleeding around the kidneys and blood in his urine. But anyway, he was admitted to hospital. They were treating it, but obviously how they treat it is suppressing the immune system, and he caught COVID as a hospital-borne infection.
So I think, John, you're in a position where you understand what I'm talking about. With people are really drawn to this, like having an adult that takes care of them. And once they're gone, they don't know what to do anymore. So they're like, "Oh well, God's going to look after me."
Well, this is the thing. Like, what I mean is that I have a degree of, I can relate to what you're saying for the sort of like a paternal figure looking over you. So, just as for instance, my dad was 66 years old when he passed away. I was 36 years old. I work in the trades. I was faster than him, stronger than him, healthier than him. And if there was any need for, if I needed him from like a physical point, just by virtue of his age, and my age relative to his. But it was the knowing that there was a person stood behind you who had your back, no matter what. That person. It doesn't matter when I
believed in God. When I believed in God, I was 4 years old because of that notion, the idea that someone's looking out for you. And it was all a lie.
Yeah, but it also abdicates personal responsibility because people defer their own moral code to God rather than themselves.
Well, this is what I was saying. So I have a brother, I have a stepbrother, and I have a stepsister. I'm the eldest out of all of them. I have kids of my own now. He's not there to go to for advice anymore. And in a very real sense, I didn't feel like. I would say I didn't feel like a man, but I suppose the PC way of phrasing it would be I didn't feel like an adult until I knew that he wasn't there anymore. In a weird way, I always felt like a child. I don't feel like a child anymore because the buck now stops with me. I don't have that person stood behind me.
No, I get it. No, look, I didn't feel like an adult until 50. Okay, but yeah, once my dad passed. I don't know, it's been 5, 6, 7 years. I don't know. It's been a while. But yeah, things changed after that, right? I mean, you realize that you are getting older. Your life's changing. I made significant changes in my own personal life, and for the better kind of stuff. And so yeah, after you hit 50, then you kind of go, hey, look, I really am an adult. But you had mentioned something earlier about hypothesis testing. Type 1 and type 2 errors, right? So reject when you accidentally whether you reject the null when you shouldn't have, or you fail to reject when you should have, right? Type 1 and type 2 errors, which is funny because you always hear null hypothesis being talked about with atheism, and I just had a discussion with somebody on one of the web pages where they're keep bringing up null hypothesis because Matt Dillahunty loves to do that, but they never explain anything about why it's a null hypothesis. They never once explain what the experiment is, their p-values, their confidence level. They never explain anything about how the hell atheism relates to inferential statistics. I've never seen anybody make that correlation properly.
Also, the null hypothesis isn't a term that you can use when you're sort of talking about sort of belief and disbelief.
Yeah,
it's a misunderstanding of what a null hypothesis is. A null hypothesis is a statistical term.
Right.
It's not when I was talking about type 1 or type 2 errors. The way it was presented to me initially was where our ancestor is a hominid, and they're in a field there, and the bush next to them rustles. Mm-hmm. Now, hominid A runs away, and hominid B goes, "Oh, it's just the wind," and gets eaten. Hominid A, who runs away, thinks it's a predator in the bush and ascribes agency to it, and therefore survives and goes on to breed, which means we have a predisposition to assume agency in things that we don't understand or don't know.
Yeah, well,
from what I understand from humanity's origins, we were really good at spotting stuff that was coming to kill us and running away.
Yeah, well, that
seems to be what led us to survive.
There's arguments out there that having false beliefs is an evolutionary advantage. in some cases. There's arguments for that,
Well,
right? So when the
I
argument
mean,
is
we can trace the entire species back to 5,000 mothers of birthing age in northern Africa. We know where we all came from at this point. Like, there's no denying it.
So
and yet, it seems like because we stand very tall, we stand up straight. We're not like the other simians. And we have good eyesight. We can hear reasonably well, and we're pretty good at running away for long distances to protect ourselves from threats.
I think our success as a species is down to sort of two distinct factors, really.
Tools.
We're generalists in terms of our capability. Our eyesight, if you look throughout the animal kingdom, average.
We have decent eyesight. It's not the best, but it's pretty good.
Average. But then because we're generalists in terms of our physical capabilities, and then if you then with the generalist in terms of the physical capability, you have access to, and then you put an intellect on top of that, and like you say, tool using on top of that, it opens up a whole world of scope.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't believe the hurdles that a lot of animals would have to go through to figure out how to make a pointy stick.
Well,
we figured it out.
There's evidence that apes are doing that right now. Chimpanzees and monkeys.
I know, and I'm kind of scared of them.
Wait till they rise up. I've seen the movies. Rise of the.
I saw all the movies.
Rise of the simiiforms.
My daughter's 7, and we're teaching her how to tie her shoelaces at the moment. We're trying to move her away from like Velcro shoes and zip-up shoes and things. But I could be wrong here, but I did hear something in some sort of nature program or something, and it's where people have interacted with like higher primates. Nobody has ever successfully taught a chimpanzee or a higher primate to be able to tie a bow and shoes.
Yeah. I can only think of the gorilla that they
yet. I don't think it's outside the capacity. I mean, I just think that it hasn't happened yet, but it could happen in a time.
But certainly,
I mean, they live a very different life from us, so it's like really hard to teach them that stuff.
So real quick, to kind of get back on the topic here, because we were way in the weeds, and I don't want it to be a 2-hour video. So this is what I wrote about Matt Dillahunty tells a caller he's wrong about disbelief when the caller was right. So, and I said recently Matt Dillahunty told a caller he's wrong when a caller actually was correct. About 2 minutes in, Matt tells a caller he's wrong about how disbelief is used in philosophy. Matt tells the caller disbelief is merely not assuming you're right. This is in stark contrast with the literature. I wrote, this is what he says. Not assuming you're right. That's what he said disbelief means. Now, in this particular video with DeSouza, what does he say disbelief means? The positive unbelief. He said, that's not what his words were, but he basically says that disbelief means to believe false. Right? He's using disbelief how I explained disbelief was being used, but years ago when he had this caller, is atheism a lie, on this particular video. In fact, I have the timestamp here. Should I play it?
So in the interest of being, and I'm not suggesting that you're not being fair to Matt, but in the interest of being fair, it should be noted that there is,
I tend to
I think, some time difference between these two positions. And you have yourself said, Steve, that a rational entity is a person who assesses information and changes their mind.
But here's the problem. He wavers back and forth depending on where he goes.
Agree. That's but if you've just got these 2 points.
Inconsistent. Yeah.
No, I agree with you. But if you're just assessing these 2 points and these 2 points alone.
Listen to what he says, though. Listen to what he says. This is from Atheist Experience 23.06.
Faith is the reason people give for believing something when they don't have a good reason.
Okay, it's more or less kind of the same thing. It's a valid reason, a valid form of evidence.
I would say sound, but okay.
Whereas disbelief is the assumption or the rejection of a claim, or the assumption of the claim being wrong.
No, it's not.
See, he says the disbelief is the assumption that something's wrong. I wouldn't call it assumption, but basically disbelief is his position that it's false. Correct? That's what the caller's implying. We all agree?
Agreed.
Disbelief is not assuming you're wrong. It's not being convinced that you're right.
I don't know what's up with this guy. I don't know who's filling his coffers to make him it's hard for me to comprehend it.
But did you hear what he said, Rod? He said
Yeah.
Disbelief is not believing you're wrong, which it is. If I say, I disbelieve you, you're claiming that person is wrong. You're claiming they have a false belief. That's what it's understood for in all of academia that I've seen. So
no, it's not.
Listen again.
Disbelief is not assuming you're wrong. It's not being convinced that you're right.
It's not being convinced you're right. So he's saying disbelief is merely being not convinced. We know that's wrong. I wrote my blog on that, which, by the way, he never corrected. He never said, oh, you're right, Steve. I actually gave evidence from many different sources, including dictionaries going back to the 16th century. I cite a paper or two. Burgess Jackson, I cite him, all of them, and I'll put this in the video description. But yeah, I show that disbelief.
Yeah, no Jackson. Yeah,
I show that disbelief means to believe false. And did I get any credit for this? Right, disbelief, positive unbelief, mental rejection.
When I actually get into like, I don't really like to engage in arguments with these people because, like, oftentimes, like I said, so it's an Ouroboros. You're chasing your own tail.
Well, yeah, because you can never pin them down because they're all over the place. Matt loves to.
No. The key is you use their weapons against them.
I just use.
I'm like, oh, should I? So if you believe in this deistic mythology, so should I believe in Cthulhu, Hinduism, Buddhism?
I believe those Cthulhu
Islam,
exist.
And they never have an answer for it. I'm like, well, they all say they're real, so how is yours more real than theirs?
But Rod, I don't sit there and say I merely don't believe in Cthulhu. I say Cthulhu doesn't exist. That's my position.
Yeah.
It'd be pretty cool if Cthulhu did exist.
But here's
that'd be pretty metal.
Here's a peer-reviewed paper from Burgess Jackson, a really great paper, and it says disbelief is a case of belief. To believe a sentence false is believe the negation of the sentence is true. We disbelieve that there are ghosts. We believe that there are none. That's what it means. And so I noticed this then when Matt pulled this move.
Not very complicated. I think a 5-year-old can comprehend that.
Yeah, but here he is.
To be honest.
But here he is now agreeing with me. Once again, Matt Dillahunty changed his position. I'm right. This is twice now he's changed positions after things I've told him he was wrong on. One about agnostic atheism. I told him he was wrong on that, and he's changed the position because he no longer thinks it's rational or sensical in the weak case. And now he accepts disbelief as I told him it was in 2019.
The problem with Matt here is that in the discussions and the interactions that he's had with yourself, Steve, and other and other people who've either had formal training or haven't had formal training but have a deeper understanding of the philosophy and the epistemology.
The ecclesiarchy.
The thing with Matt, that if I was to be given the most generous interpretation that I can of why he does what he does and why he flip-flops from one position to the next, I think there's probably a degree of frustration on his part, because Matt's arguments when he's dealing with dogma and the Bible specifically, and I'm sure if he had as deep a knowledge of the Quran or the Torah, he'd be just as competent at swatting those things down as well. His arguments when he's dealing with specific tenets of the religions are actually, I find, to be pretty good and pretty convincing and excellent.
That's fine. Yeah, I
agree. I don't think he's dumb. There's just something behind the scenes that I'm not aware of.
I don't think he's dumb either. Let me make it very clear. I don't think he's dumb. I think he's dishonest. There's a difference. He's intellectually dishonest. He's not dumb.
But this is why, like I commented earlier, where I said I think it's a tactic. I don't think it's dishonest. I mean, it is dishonest.
Someone's pulling the strings. There has to be something going on.
The reason I say that I think it's a tactic is because he's sick to death
of
arguing against a person who claims to hold a particular dogmatic position, and then he argues against them, and they retreat from the dogmatic position to the deistic position. And the deistic position, he then can no longer present a burden of proof, because the burden of proof, what he's arguing against is so denuded of dogma, and arguably is a non-overlap.
Okay, let's assume that. But okay, John. So let me run this by you. Let's assume all that's true, and maybe again, I understand why they have a show based upon this, where the theist calls it up, and it's all on them. I understand that's not a format I really care for, but I at least get it, right? I do. Yeah. I don't begrudge the atheist experience going that route. What I begrudge them is lying about it, and 2, telling people that I'm wrong about it when I wasn't.
Yeah, those completely agree.
So
completely agree.
That's what bugs me, because Matt, for the longest time, still says Steve's wrong, and yet every time I turn around, he's agreeing with me. Now
he's almost like these like OnlyFans girls who like have got a boyfriend, but they can't admit that they've got a boyfriend, because then it will cause a lot of people to abandon them. Whereas so Matt Dillahunty's position is,
we're not going to get into that. We're not going to go there. Sorry, I'm not going to go there.
Yeah, I don't really know exactly what you mean, but it sounds funny, so I like it.
No, the audience will get it. I'm not going there. They understand that I'm not touching that one.
I'd say it's fine. I don't need further exploration of it.
I'm not going there.
It's all right, I'll send you a link to my wife's. She starts at £22 a month. Right?
Oh my goodness.
But that's what bugs me. Like I said,
it's mostly feet, to be honest.
Oh God! But Matt.
Nah, I don't like feet. Feet are disgusting.
Just before everybody starts going and looking for my wife's OnlyFans, I'm joking. She doesn't have an.
No.
But you do though.
I don't like feet. I hate my own feet.
But Matt's lied about me so many times. It's ridiculous, though. I mean, he even lied. I'm not even kidding. He lied about why he blocked me. It was a straight up lie.
What did he say about you?
So on Facebook, I had made a post, and it's still there. I don't delete anything. The post basically says, whatever argument I had at the time, and I don't remember if it was my semantic collapse argument or my WASP argument, whatever it was, doesn't matter. But basically, my point was, why is it that all the experts in logic and philosophy are agreeing with my arguments, and the only people that are not are people that are armchair persons or worse,
like contrarians?
Where I said that, the people that work at like gas stations and Walmart and nothing to grade on those, because look, I've had those jobs. I work retail, so I mean, I'm not one to talk. I am in that category, but that wasn't my point. My point was, why should I, if I'm going to believe people, my point was very simple. Why should I believe the person who doesn't have any formal education, right, who works at a gas station, or the experts who teach the topic? That was my argument. I wasn't degrading the person who works at the gas station.
Yeah, you were just like why should I ask the guy
who
does my brake job on my car for philosophical advice?
Well, yeah. Why would I go to my grocer about my car needing brakes rather than my mechanic? Yeah. Right.
I think you've got a few things going on. You've got.
But he blocked me over that. He lied and said I was mocking people that weren't intellectual status or anything like that. Like, no, that wasn't my argument. I even put in the post, I'm not degrading anybody. I put something along the lines of, look, I'm not trying to put those people down. I'm just asking, why is it that Matt thinks, or Aaron at the time, whoever it was,
absolutely. I'm not one for patience, and if I ever saw you doing something wrong, I would have said something. And I've known you for a while now. I've never seen you be a dick to these people, and they're all being assholes to you.
I never was a dick to Matt. I've never was a dick to Matt.
I think you've got a few things going on. Like some of the cretins on Facebook are the equivalent of. I mean, let's look at it from the perspective of somebody takes their car into the garage because it's making a funky noise.
Garage.
And there's somebody who knows nothing about cars, and they drive the car onto the lot, and they go and grab the mechanic, and they say, "Oh yeah, I think it's the flux capacitor."
Oh yeah,
that's the Facebook level of argumentation, and that's the idiot.
We're gonna hit 80 miles an hour, and we're gonna see some real shit.
Yeah, and then you've got people such as yourself, Steve, who I would put as sort of the person who has a theoretical understanding about how the engine works, and you've got logical understanding. So when you drive in, you go, "Oh yeah, there's a knocking sound," but I don't think it's the wheel weights, because it knocks when it's under power, but when I'm coasting, it doesn't knock. So I don't think it's. Do you know what I mean? That's
it's not in the
and then the mechanic goes, "Oh yeah, I know." Yeah, and the mechanic goes, "Oh yeah, so that could be this."
Yes,
and then so you've got sort of like the idiot who knows nothing. Then you've got the person who doesn't have formal training but is interested or has a degree of competency in a subject, so they're able to provide input.
Clearly they don't have a functioning flux capacitor.
Is it knocking
And then
generally?
you've got the mechanics, and then you've got the engineers.
But is it knocking generally due to incomplete combustion?
Yeah.
Don't get me started on the text stuff. I'm from a family of text.
That's why they had.
I'm not necessarily talking about engine knocking. It could be like a knocking noise or a wobble or.
But you need blinker fluid. Yeah, blinker fluid.
Yeah, but what I mean by the analogy, Matt is the person who will flip from your position, because I don't think that he doesn't know these things.
Yeah, right. I agreed. I think he does. He just willfully.
He will bounce from the I think it's the flux capacitor position to the actually no.
I think he's flip flopping around because like there has to be benefactors that are
ego. He's
causing him to engage. Ego because
it's all ego with him.
He thinks people give a shit about him. Yeah, I don't. He just like never watch any of his fucking videos once.
He just like says the ego. That's all.
I don't mean to be insulting, but I mean it's not all of us can be entertainers. That's the way it is.
All right, let's finish this up real quick. 1 minute left.
So knowledge.
Are you saying you don't know that there's
a power? I know you guys can't hear in the inside here, but just bear with me. Listen to the outside.
No, it's fine. Don't worry about it.
I'm saying I know it in the sense that I accept the authorities from which I learn about it.
Sure.
I trust it.
Well,
and if I went
clarity,
there,
it's not just relying on authority. It's actual evidence. So you have a belief in a proposition,
right?
Whether or not it qualifies as knowledge is a separate question, because knowledge is a subset of belief.
And by the way, he's absolutely right in that. What he said was, knowledge is a subset of belief. You have a belief on a proposition. Whether you have knowledge on that is completely different. And he's right on this. This is the whole reason why Matt Dillahunty accepts the fact that agnostic atheism in the weak case doesn't make any sense, because knowledge is a subset of belief. Who do you think he got all that evidence from? Hello, those are my arguments, right? I mean, for the longest time, he was, going around, saying he's agnostic atheist, and then finally he said, no, I'm not going to use that term any longer. It makes no sense in the weak case. It only makes sense if you have a belief first, and he's absolutely right. But those are all my arguments. And
I hope he respects how fair you're being to him.
I've been fair.
You could just be an asshole and being like, oh, look at this piece of shit. But like, no, you're just like you're like
the only time
deciphering what he's saying as best you can and politely.
The only time I've been addicted to him.
I hope he respects that.
No, he doesn't listen. He doesn't give a shit. See, here's the thing. When it comes to these,
really, was he a 5-year-old? Seriously, like, come on, man. There's people who don't like me at all.
He won't address it. I have to say,
that still give me a fair shake.
But Rod,
and I give him credit for it.
Right,
right.
He cannot address what he knows. He knows deep down that I'm right, because people that know him have told him, and he has no argument against it. So I think he is aware that I am correct on the stuff. It doesn't care to though. The only time I've been addicted to him, and with good cause, is that he went out of his way to support my former business partner and shit on a victim of domestic abuse. And I've gone on him for that, because he's never apologized to me nor the victim of abuse that suffered at Kyle's hands. And so he supported a domestic abuser and saying that he was just a lying drunk ex, rather than listening to this testimony. And I'm like, as a skeptic, you're shitting on somebody who had a deposition in court and saying that there is a, vindictive drunk ex, rather than actually looking at the evidence and realizing that Kyle was lying in court, because everybody who looked at the evidence found that out. So he was.
That's pretty shitty.
Yeah, to me, he's not a true skeptic. To me, he's just an egotist that wants to go wherever somebody strokes his ego. Because if he was a true skeptic, he would have investigated that properly before he shat on a victim of domestic abuse, saying that they were lying.
Yeah, I'm an advocate for people who are victims of domestic abuse, and that's kind of a fucked up thing to do.
Yeah. So
unfortunately, I think Matt is, he's if the sort of progressive LGBTQIA plus alphabet people is the black hole, then Matt is the accretion disk that's running around the edge of it.
I mean, sorry to interrupt. That's just something you can say. You don't even have to really believe in it. Look at Disney; they don't give a fuck about LGBTQ.
But it's just business to them.
I think Matt is a progressive in that.
Yeah, he is.
But he's one of those progressives that thinks that just because continuous movement, and if you call continuous movement progress, then it must be a good thing.
Well,
with it, like, if you really believe in that stuff, you got to put your balls in it and actually be part of the cause.
What the reason that I
whether it's
mention it
protests or voting or whatever.
No. Matt,
the reason I mention it is
Matt's an activist when it comes to that. I mean, his girlfriend is trans.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
good.
But also, the reason that I mention it is from the perspective of colouring his position towards what. I mean, he had no meaningful information, or as far as I know, he had no meaningful information, no inside knowledge about what was going on between you and Kyle.
He didn't care.
I think he just assumed. Kyle.
Don't say his name too many times,
Steve,
please.
What I mean is Steve, straight, slightly older gentleman, wrong, part of the patriarchy, therefore bad. Kyle, slightly younger, gay gentleman, must be good, therefore right. He just applied the intersectional criteria and got it completely fucking wrong because he made a load of assumptions.
100%. That's
exactly. I don't want to talk about my interactions with him.
But now he can't step back from that, because if he steps back from that, then he risks bleeding a load of support. And as much as he says, "Look, I don't care if you don't agree with me or not. If you don't agree with me, fuck off."
Yeah, he never apologized.
Why couldn't he just play ball? Like, it seems like you guys had a good thing going on.
He's an egotist, and like you said, if he ever publicly agreed with me, it would be detrimental to him, and he knows that because he hangs around with a lot of shitty people. In fact, I mean. Half the people hey, let me finish. The things he does, the people he does shows with, benefited from the non sequitur show. Jimmy Snow helped get started from the non sequitur show. At least built, a bigger reputation from it. And Jimmy Snow is one of the most dishonest people I've ever met in my life. I mean, so
I think your show, if he played ball and he was polite, would have carried on pretty well. Maybe not huge. You're not going to be PewDiePie or something.
Well, it just didn't have to lie. Look, all I ask for is don't lie about me and don't shit on people telling the truth. And that's what Matt did. He shat on people telling the truth. And that's unforgivable. And he'll never move past that. But
I have to say, I'm really disappointed because I do like quite a lot of Matt's content. There's some of the arguments that he makes, just like, for instance,
it's not all wrong. Yeah, he gets some.
No, but
when, like, be entertaining.
He does. I don't know if this is originally his argument, so hopefully he's not co-opted it from someone else, because I've assumed that he has credit for it. But it's things like, look, I'm an atheist. My mum's a fundamentalist Christian, and she believes that I'm going to hell and she's going to heaven, but there's no suffering in heaven. So if she ends up in heaven and I end up in hell, and she knows she's not gonna care, but she's not suffering in heaven, then she's not my mum anymore. God has fundamentally changed something in her brain. She's no longer the same person.
Heaven honestly sounds more torturous. It seems like there's more stuff to do in hell.
Well, this is the argument I made. Secular Outpost. What you said is exactly the argument I was making. If you go to heaven, who are you? What memories
you sit on a fucking cloud and you suck God's balls for eternity.
But are you going to have an infinite amount of memories? Are you going to remember your life here? But I mean, we're talking eternity. We're finite beings as far as our apprehension. Will you have an infinite amount of memories when you go to heaven? I mean, what makes you you? You're no longer.
It sounds like a nightmare. I'd rather just die.
Right. Well, let me finish when I'm making a statement, because you interrupt me in the middle. So, if we're a collection of memories, right? Our identity is who we are based on our experiences. When you no longer have a body, right? So your physical form isn't what makes you as far as your consciousness, but you are identified with your physical form. If you don't even have that, you don't have memories of living on Earth. Let's assume that those are gone. Who are you in heaven? And let's assume, even arguendo, that you do have the memories of Earth. What memories would you have as a baby if you die as a baby? Or how many memories should you keep? Or after an eternity in heaven, what else is there to do? What is you going to have? An infinite amount of memory? I mean, there's a lot of unanswered questions, and of course, the only real retort that a theist would have is God's mysterious. We don't know. Yeah. So, now go ahead. But that's my argument about identity.
It's like the whole sort of like, if in an infinite time span, everything is possible. So sort of like a Christian gets themselves into heaven by doing things like not cheating on their wife and that sort of stuff.
I'd be more okay with it if it didn't suck so much.
Yeah.
It sounds like boring shit.
And by the way, Unfriendly Atheist says theism is a belief in God, so anti-theism is anti-belief in God. No, anti-theism is an axiological term. It is the negation, basically, of protheism. Protheism is the position that religion and or belief in God is either beneficial to society or at least neutral. Anti-theism is the position that the belief in God and or religion is overall net axiologically devalued for religion. It has nothing to do with it has nothing to do with the ontological status of God. Belief in God is theism. Belief in God does not exist as atheism. Anti-theism is the position on value of that belief in society. That's how the term has always been used in academia.
Yeah, the cost-benefit analyses in one direct, in the positive and the negative.
So he says, not anti-God. The definition has been twisted because religion causes retardation. Definition twisted by whom? This is if you go look at anti-theism, 99% of the time is going to be used axiologically. That's just go look it up in Encyclopedia Britannica or Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy.
There's a whole lot of gods out there. You have Zoroastrianism. No one likes talking about that, even though that's where Christianity plagiarized all of its shit.
The one true religion, right? All right, let's finish this video real quick.
Philosophy would be justified.
Yeah, sure.
I tend to use a more kind of colloquial because I'm a dilettante. I'm an uneducated oaf who just talks a lot. But if you have a proposition and you accept that it's true, that's all I mean when I say I believe it. You either accept it or you don't.
Okay, so he just said, when he said he's uneducated, okay, whatever. But he says, if you have a proposition, you either accept it or you don't. Okay, the proposition, God does not exist. Matt, do you accept that proposition or you don't? If you don't accept it, why? If you do accept it, then you believe there's no God, which, again, he always has said from the beginning, he believes there's no God. So why is it he's only evaluating the proposition that there is a God and not evaluating the proposition that there is a God when they're coextensive? You cannot have one without the other because of the law of negation. So he's just like talking about proposition is right. I mean, you either believe proposition or you don't. So you either believe there isn't a God or you don't believe there isn't a God. But Matt's trying to argue
with the exception of innocence to the proposition.
Well, no, but innocents don't believe either. All innocents don't believe because they're unaware. They don't believe the proposition because they're unaware of the proposition to even have a belief one way or another. That's what innocent would. All innocents don't believe.
Yeah, but to hold the position, you don't need the negation of it. Is what I mean.
Well, sure, yeah.
If I say,
oh my God, the more we discuss it, the more it sounds like a Mononoke fairy tale.
Mononoke.
Or like, oh my God, like this is stories for children.
By the way, do you want me to play the video inside? I can play it so you guys can hear it if you want. It doesn't matter.
It's fine. I'm switching between the two.
Most people mean when they say
like miking off, and so I can hear it on the other side, so it's fine. But I've watched this multiple times, so I get the gist of it. So
literally means most people mean when they say I know.
Mononoke, by the way, way better than any religion.
Really believe it. They're talking about the confidence level that they have in that proposition that it is likely true. And when we say I know something, generally we're saying I believe this to the extent that it would be worldview altering to discover it was wrong.
And I'm okay with what he just said. I mean, he's basically using knowledge to say, look, I believe something to such a confidence level that it would be world altering if it's wrong. I'm okay with that, actually. But when people say they know something, they are generally meaning to believe that they accept something to such a degree that if they were wrong about it, it would be earth shaking to them. Okay, cool. This is why I'm saying I know X equals X, right? And if X equals X is wrong, it's going to be cataclysmic to my entire understanding of logic, math, and epistemology. Correct?
I actually liked Matt's that distinction of look.
I'm okay with that. It doesn't bother me.
Yeah, I like it because it's specific to the it's specific to the person, and it cuts quite nicely through the absolutism that people seem to make the assumption of around knowledge.
But this is why you don't really need to go out there saying I know this and I know that. If you're just talking about beliefs, like it's because the question is, does God exist? And so why talk about knowledge? You don't really need to, because the question is not asking you, do you know God exists? The question is, does God exist? Is a belief question. And by the way, Matt said I was wrong on that too. He said, oh, the great debate question isn't does God exist? It's do you believe in God? No, Matt, you're wrong. Never has been in that. The great debate question has always been, does God exist? Yes, theist, no atheist. I don't have a position either way, agnostic. Welcome to Philosophy 101. That's and Matt does understand that. But he continues to always say, oh, by the way, I'm not doing this, but it tells me now in ads, it says now ads will run shortly for some viewers, this is new. I've never seen that before, so I'm not doing anything. I guess it just puts an ad.
I don't get ads. I don't get anything, but yeah, good on you. It's free money.
Yeah, did it come up because it does it automatically now? I'm like, that's weird.
There you go.
But I totally forgot what I was going to say.
Score.
Oh yeah. So he knows the agnostic position is somebody who neither believes or disbelieves. But that's what he's trying to argue in these. This is where it all falls down. He's trying to argue the neutral position. I'm not saying I believe you. I mean, or don't believe you. I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm just saying that I don't accept your proposition. I don't believe you. And that, of course, is agnosticism if you have no positive epistemic either way. So he's trying to play this some weird semantic game by calling himself an atheist, but taking the agnostic position when he actually holds the atheist position. He actually holds the belief there is no God, but he retreats to the agnostic position, but doesn't even dare call that agnosticism, which it exactly is.
If he's not bowing to a benefactor or constituents in his audience, I don't really know why he would do that.
He does bow. Well, he does bow.
Like, just stick to your real belief. Like, people respect that when you're real.
That's what I think, but he won't do that. That's why I keep calling him out. That's why I make these videos. I keep calling Matt Dillahunty out every time he becomes this repetition of sophistry that he goes around misleading people, which he did in this video. So
you could make a drinking game out of watching Matt, and by that what I mean is you get like a set.
Way to kill me with alcohol.
No, but what I mean is you could get it. You could get a set.
He's a recovering alcoholic. You don't do that with
him.
Well, you could get a set theory diagram, but you get a set diagram of the set of all things that exist, and then you could have the subset of things that do and things that don't believe, and then you could have the subset of things that don't believe.
We should all take a hit of crack when he tells a lie.
But then we should all be sort of like pointing at the point at which Matt is basing his argument from, and every time he changes position, the last person to acknowledge that he changes position has to drink.
They'd be drunk.
I just wish he would tell the truth so we didn't have to.
Like I said, I don't think he can because he's so worried about his constituents. But this is why people are getting sick of it. This is why theists and atheists are both calling him out. This is why Matt's lost a lot of following. He has no core convictions. And I think people are recognizing that. And of course, he's mixing it again. He's doing the whole atheism plus thing again, trying. That worked out great last time, didn't it? So he's caused so many fractures in the atheist community.
Almost nobody even knows about that at this point. It's like sure gone.
I sure do. I remember.
I know you do, but like millions of people around the world have no idea that it ever existed.
What's so funny is I have been.
And I'm an atheist too, so it's like, but I was never part of it.
I've been so consistent into things I put out that I've not vacillated or varied hardly at all, unless I change my position on something, which is rare. But I put out what I believe. Matt doesn't, because if Matt was honest, he would, one, finally admit that it was my arguments on agnostic atheism that convinced him. Two, that he would admit that he was wrong by telling a caller that belief was merely, I don't accept your claim because I was wrong. And three, admit my paper's correct. And four, admit that Kyle was a piece of shit and that he did falsely.
He did some felonious things.
Yeah, he falsely accused a drunk ex, an ex of just being a big gruntle, ex.
Oh yeah, it was his boyfriend that he beat up, right?
Yeah, exactly. Kyle beat up his boyfriend, and that was the guy that did testimony for the court case. And Matt's like, so the entire case comes down to a jilted drunk ex-boyfriend. Good luck. I mean, he's like, congratulations on your win. He told Kyle, congratulations on your win, even though we all knew Kyle was lying.
Cops know how to deal with this. They've seen plenty of drunken bouts.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's something that Matt will never live down because he was not being a skeptic. And I don't believe them when he preaches skepticism. It only skepticism when it behooves himself. Because if he's a true skeptic, he would have evaluated my paper and came to a rational conclusion on it and been fair. And he wouldn't hide behind, I blocked Steve because he shat on, people that weren't, of academia, which has never happened. He absolutely lied by. He just didn't want to have to address my arguments. So he conveniently found a way to hang up, which is fine. The man never has to address anything, but we still call him out.
He blocked me because I commented, because I followed him on Facebook and stuff. And I said, I think it would have been better. This is like when all the court cases were being dismissed on standing for the claims of election fraud on Trump's side during the 2020. Well, no, but I mean, look, I think there was some ropey behavior going on, but I don't think there was anything that would have turned over the outcome of the election. But all I said was I think it would have been better if they hadn't have just like dismissed a lot of the court cases just on standing. If they'd actually heard the court cases and put the evidence,
them. Yeah,
yeah. And because I said that, all of my comments were deleted and I was blocked and yeeted from following him. So I was like, no, I wasn't saying that Trump. Yeah, and it was really mild. And then what they said is, oh, actually,
yeah, no, it sounds like a very civil way to, represent what you were saying.
You can't have
why would you get blocked for that?
You can't have
somebody said, oh, the cases, they were all dismissed because they had no merit. And I said, no, if they dismiss on standing, then they don't look at the evidence that's presented. They look at the person who is presenting it and state that they don't have a grievance against them.
Yes, no
they don't have to look at the evidence. They look at the person. And one of the entities that was dismissed on standing was the fucking state of Texas. You can't. It's ridiculous.
Oh, they're a wonderful state.
Anyways, I got to wrap this up, guys. I might have another stream later if I can get a hold of Ada to kind of do a recap on some of the nonsense stuff that was going on, and I mean the person nonsense. But that's a different video altogether. You guys are interested in that, so I do got to wrap this up. But John and Rot, thanks for joining me. I appreciate it always.
Always a pleasure.
Thanks for the mods. Thanks for the members. Yeah.
If you do it at an appropriate time and I'm conscious, I'll drop on, Steve. You know me.
Yeah. So. If I don't, like I said, I don't. Maybe I'm technically off today, but they kind of wanted me to go in, but I'm like, nah, I don't. Sorry, I just don't. So
take it easy, rest your head.
Yeah, no, I guess. Yeah,
no. It sounds like all this has been like a terrible annoyance to you.
I want to go out and get some sun. It's beautiful. Alexa, what's the temperature?
Yeah. Right now, it's 76 degrees.
Oh, it's beautiful outside. 76 degrees here. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Oh, thank you, Alexa.
I want to go outside and get some. Alexa, I love you.
Thank you. I really appreciate
ask Alexa to do a fart. That's one of my favorite things.
No, I've done that. She has a whole collection of farts.
Right now.
She does.
I love that.
What's 76 degree in first world temperature?
76.
We have real temperatures here.
That's Fahrenheit. What's that in Celsius?
20. Oh God, 20. Alexa, what is room temperature in Celsius? 25, 26?
Living room doesn't support that.
No. Alexa, what is room temperature in Celsius?
Living room.
I know 28.
28? Sounds about right.
No, I know 28 Celsius is
about 76.
82 Fahrenheit.
Okay, that's a little high.
Because if you just reverse the numbers, then 28 is 82.
It doesn't work that way.
But obviously the zero starts at a different point.
It sounds
so
like
I
would guess around 27 to 28. Alexa, what is 76 degrees in centigrade?
76 degrees Fahrenheit is about 24.44
24. Okay,
degrees
so in that ballpark, yeah. I do know that
close.
I do know that 50 degrees Celsius is 122 degrees Fahrenheit because it hit 122 degrees here, which is 50 degrees Celsius, which that's hot, by the way. 50 degrees Celsius.
Yeah.
All right, let's wrap it up. I'm going to end the StreamYard here and wrap it up my audience. Thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, take it easy, guys.
See you all.
Yep.
Have a good.
All right. If I didn't close that out, I was never going to end this particular video. So I just want you guys to evaluate this. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you agree that Matt keeps changing his position left and right. That he just won't talk about agnosticism in any real fair way because he still talks about agnosticism as not being between belief and not belief, which is true but irrelevant. He's hiding in the agnostic position while calling that atheism by merely saying that he doesn't believe somebody, but we all know now that he's completely foobar when it comes to these terms. So like I said, let me know what you think. I think that Matt's intellectually dishonest. I just every time I find one of these little clips, I'm going to be doing a little talk about it, and people want to watch, that's fine. If they don't, that's fine too. But if you disagree, just tell me why. Show me evidence. That's it. And with that, good night.